Hello, and welcome back to episode 6 of the Kelly Lawson Podcast, where we tackle big questions, challenge assumptions, and make the complex understandable. Today's episode asks a simple question: is tyranny bad? Now, most people would answer that in a heartbeat. Yes, obviously. But if we slow down and take a closer look, historically, philosophically, and even in our everyday work lives, the question becomes more layered than it first appears. We usually think of tyranny as the domain of political dictators. Mao, Stalin, Hitler, Amin. But tyranny doesn't always come from marching soldiers or state propaganda. Sometimes it comes in business suit. Sometimes it looks like a performance review. Sometimes tyranny doesn't rule a nation, it rules a meeting room. What if tyranny exists wherever power is exercised without accountability? Rules are enforced without empathy, and dissent is punished instead of explored. In this episode, we're going to examine tyranny across 5 lenses: its definition and origin, its major historical examples, the philosophical arguments surrounding it, the empirical data on its outcomes, and finally, how tyranny shows up in the workplace, family, and what that tells us about power today. Let's get started by defining what tyranny really is, both in ancient texts and modern offices. To understand whether tyranny is bad, we first have to define it, not just politically, but also in the structures that shape our daily lives. The term tyranny comes from the Greek tyrannos, which described a ruler who seized power outside legal or traditional authority. Originally, it wasn't necessarily negative, but over time it evolved to mean unchecked, unaccountable, and often cruel control. The Cambridge Dictionary defines tyranny as government by a ruler or small group of people who have unlimited power over people in their country or state and use it unfairly or cruelly. The Oxford Dictionary calls it cruel and oppressive government or rule. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy adds a little depth to this: the unjust, oppressive exercise of power by a single ruler, typically maintained by force, fear, and suppression of dissent. We're going to come back and you'll hear that later when we start talking about family tyrannies. Now we usually hear these definitions and think dictators, authoritarian states, military regimes, but tyranny doesn't always wear a uniform or sit on a throne. Sometimes it looks like a CEO, a policy manual, or even a parent. Tyranny shows up anywhere there's power without listening, control without consent, authority without empathy. Sounds like a construction site. In the workplace, tyranny might mean punishing creativity because it challenges processes, silencing feedback out of fear, measuring success only in compliance, not in contribution. That's a big one right there. There's your military. Management thinker Gary Hamel warns about this in his book, The Future of Management. He writes, "Bureaucracy constitutes the operating system for virtually every large-scale organization on the planet. Yet it is a toxic compound of rule-following, power-hoarding, and innovation-stifling habits." But here's a deeper cut. Tyranny can exist in families too. In a family or relationship, tyranny might look like always being right, no questions asked. A lot of marriages are that way. Using fear or guilt instead of a conversation. A lot of relationships are that way. Withholding affection as a tool of control. Let me repeat that one. Withholding affection as a tool of control. Children raised under strict obedience but no voice. Do as I say and don't have any opinion about it. This doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it hides behind the language of discipline or tradition. But when love becomes conditional and authority goes unchecked, the home becomes a monarchy. We're going to talk about those kind of things in future episodes. Monarchies, democracies, republics, these socialist endeavors, communism. There's a common thread, whether in politics, corporations, or homes. Tyranny thrives when fear replaces freedom. Tyranny has left deep scars on every continent. From revolutionary zeal to totalitarian repression, history gives no shortage of case studies. Let's look at 5 leaders, one from China, Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas, who became symbols of absolute control. We'll examine the death tolls, the ideologies, and the patterns that still echo today, not just in states, but sometimes in systems we consider normal. Number 1 on the list from China, Mao Zedong, People's Republic of China. Mao led China from 1949 until his death in 1976. His policies, especially the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, led to the death of an estimated 45 million people, primarily through famine, forced labor, and political purges. Source Frank Dicker, Mao's Great Famine, 2010. About Mao, one of the things that he did is when they produce a lot of food. And what he would do is he'd go, okay, well, my people are starving, but I still need money. So he sold all the food, even though his own people were starving and needed that food to eat, so that the government can stay running and he can still live the way he wants to live. Meanwhile, 45 million people starved to death and were eating each other at some point. Imagine if he would have never did that, how the population of China would be right now. 45 million people he purged in the 40s, or in the 50s, 49 through 76. But the real purges was in the early 50s in there, as he was taking reign. Mao was a leader of chaos. And we're going to go into each one of these in further episodes because they can each do 20-30 minutes easily, if not 45, talking a little bit about them. Number 2, Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union. I've spoken about him before, the secretary. Stalin's rule, 1924 to 1953, was marked by forced collectivization, labor camps, otherwise known as the gulags, and internal purges. An estimated 20 million people died as a result of his regime. Source Robert Conquest, The Great Terror, 1990. Joseph Stalin, the way he came up, poor in Poland, worked his way up through the secretary, became an administrator, was able to find out, organize things, created the 5-year plan, started recognizing weakness within the government system, started in the beginning, just like the rise of a lot of these leaders. They start off with making efficiencies, making things look better, turning things around, all of a sudden getting a little momentum as a success story, using discipline, we'll call it. It becomes tyranny when it gets unchecked. At this point, it's just discipline and structure. Tyranny comes right afterwards if there's no checks and balances. Adolf Hitler, Nazi Germany. Hitler led the Germany into World War II and orchestrated the Holocaust. It's murdered 6 million Jews and millions more. Also murdered lots of disabled persons, dissidents, and civilians. Sources, United States Holocaust Memorial Museum on the 6 million people. Number 4, Idi Amin, Uganda, ruling from 1971 to 1979. Amin's dictatorship was marked by ethnic cleansing, torture, and economic collapse. Between 1,000 to 500,000 Ugandans were killed during his regime. What you keep finding a theme of is that human life doesn't have any value in other countries around the world, especially where there's a dictatorship. And they stop losing their value, so that it's cheaper to starve them or purge them or remove them or be done with them than to have to address the needs. Number 5, Che Guevara. This is another one that I put on here because so many people like to wear the shirts of Che and they think that he's so amazing because he was a revolutionary. Number 5, Che Guevara, Cuba and beyond. As head of the La Habana prison, he oversaw hundreds of executions. Estimates ranges from 200 to 700 deaths by firing squad. What they don't sell when you're saying millions, and then this one here only has 500,000 in Uganda, and then you say Che with Cuba, Che Guevara, why would you put them on there with only 2 to 700? Because from some of the readings that I've done on Che, it was what happened not just at the prison camps where he shot the dissidents in the head. He used that prison camp, shot his competition in the head there, had them seized up and brought there, but then the reign of terror begins. That's that they don't have a number of deaths there, and they say there is a lot of them. But it was because of the brutality of how he came to power, what he did, and then you can also roll into the Fidel Castro's, same thing, where they rule with this tyranny. These leaders didn't just rule. They engineered systems where obedience replaced thought, fear replaced dialogue, and power replaced principles. The same instincts, control, suppression, unearned authority, can show up in boardrooms, classrooms, households, not with tanks, but with policies, not with prisons, but with silence, or guilt, or manipulation. These are other things, which is why I'm triggering on tyranny. So we're going to switch into our philosophical discussion on this. And now that we've seen how tyranny plays out on the world stage, let's ask a deeper question. Why is tyranny wrong? Or maybe more honestly, what makes power dangerous when left unchecked? This isn't just a political question. It's a human one. Because tyranny doesn't only show up in states or corporations, it shows up in families, marriages, and personal relationships. Tyranny is, I'm seeing it now, everywhere. Everywhere you look, in almost every relationship, you can see the outline of tyranny. It's so hard to just have a relationship with anybody. We're not talking boyfriend, girlfriend. We're talking friends. We're talking coworkers. We're talking people that have to just work together. It has gotten to the point where it is, if it's not my way, you're gone, you're cut out of my life. That's tyranny. If you argue with me, you're cut out of my life. That's tyranny. Whether it's a friend or whether it's your boss, that's tyranny. Okay, you're just going to get a yes man that just checks the box. This is tyranny, and I'm seeing it everywhere. And you say America, the land of the free. I've never been more restrained with legal restrictions, from a running a company standpoint, to a tax standpoint, to a living in a community standpoint. The rules and regulations thrust upon us American people has gotten to the point where we are living in a tyranny. We just have not accepted it. The masses have not stood up. You say, well, Kelly, they voted Trump in. And they lasted 10 minutes once you started actually doing what a tyrant needs to do. And this is something why I chose this show. Is you look at it and you go, okay, how can you turn around any culture without being a tyrant? How do you go in there and not have discipline, not have structure, not have any of this demanded, you will do this, comply, or you will be gone? That sounds a lot like tyranny. Right on the same lines, though, as discipline, structure, and it's such a fine line. And we get into this here a little bit later, but it's not a political question, it's a human one. Plato, the tyrant as slave to desire. The tyrannical man lives most wretchedly. He is in truth the poorest and most wretched of all. The Republic, Book 9. Aristotle also went on, and tyranny is selfish rule, where the good of the ruler is the end, not the good of the rule. There you have tyranny, Politics, Book 3 from Aristotle. John Locke, the right to resist. Whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, they put themselves into a state of war with the people. Second Treatise, number 222. That was John Locke. From Thomas Hobbes. Stability at the cost of freedom. Covenants without the sword are but words. Leviathan, chapter 17. Hannah Arendt. Tyranny by banality. The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil. Ekman in Jerusalem, 1963, when they were writing on the Holocaust. The philosophers are in near agreement. Tyranny is not just about cruelty. It's about the misuse of responsibility. It's when the person in power stops serving and starts controlling. Empirical outcomes and what the data tells us. We've defined tyranny, we've traced it through some history, we've looked at some of the moral consequences with the millions killed, but what happens when tyranny is put to the test in the real world? Economic efficiency, short-term gains, long-term collapse. That source is Mao's Great Famine, 2010. Short-term gains was as they got a little bit of money in to keep the government and keep him happy and comfortable, which he didn't care if he lost his 40 million people. Again, they don't value people. Long-term collapse, it set China back decades and decades and decades of what he did to them, and basically made them as poor as rice workers until like 1990. So now China's having to dig out of that hole. As a people, though, they're stuck to, they can't do anything. They're not allowed to have a choice, and they're not allowed to have an opinion because of where they live. Hence communism. But this is all coming back to whether it's communism, socialism, democracies, republics. As soon as you get to the point where you can't say anything or do anything without fear of repercussions, and even in our world, in America, where you say, well, what are the fear of repercussions? Tell me about Elon Musk's repercussions. The man lost a couple of $100 billion and Tesla's looking like it's going to fold because he decided to want to help America and he's not even an American. The dude came from South Africa. I mean, he's an American citizen now. He's a true patriot. I get that, but he can't ever be president. And here he is walking away from hundreds of billions, which we all know he'll get back. It's the point that if you lost $100 billion or more because you're actually saving the country money and doing the right thing, Doge, which in essence is a form of tyranny because they're going in and saying, nope, I don't care about your rights, meaning the rights of the federal worker that's getting unemployed because they just got let go because those positions aren't needed as we streamline and do efficiencies. All of which I agree with. The people losing their jobs do not. Federal workers that are getting let go, there's a whole lot of employers out there looking for people right now in America. We need workers. We've needed them for a very long time. We've just been sucked up by the federal government, getting the benefits that the federal government has. True tyrant in office, and he can actually do it, and I don't think we can do it in America. I think they will paralyze him. You can't affect this level of change without getting sabotaged by the judges, by the Republicans, by the Democrats, by all of the politicians going, wait a second, my constituents in my area, we just lost a large workforce because he shut down these programs. And nobody wants to get voted out. We're living in fear. The fear of no matter what we do, we're going to get in trouble. That's tyranny. That's more so. At least it's cut and dry in other countries. They know, hey, if you have political dissent, perfect example in Vietnam. I love Vietnam. I go there every year for at least a month. Love the country. Can't bring Starlink there. They ain't having that shit. You ain't going to put out something, see, look at this abuse. Not happening in that. Is that wrong? Yeah, I guess you could say right to public speech and all the American happy horse shit that we got. Okay, well, you know what? If you look back at our stuff, and it's not American shame, it's just being honest with it, we hide a lot of our stuff that we do wrong. So you never see it in the media. It's just buried. It's been buried or, redacted. Hence the government files that are coming out of all the shit we've been doing from CIA operations, all the stuff we've done, the massive drugs that we brought into our, say no on drugs, Reagan era. They were literally funding the CIA with drug money when he was doing the war on drugs. The hypocrisies which we are going to go into. They are everywhere and every country has them. But we will dive into them. The reason why we're going to dive into them is we have to figure out together how we can take this country back. How we can take it back. Because it's not walk in and shoot a guy in the head. They tried that with Trump. Didn't work. The guy missed. And if they would have killed him, what would it have did anyways? You know, we are living in a world where it's so impossible in America to really affect true change. When you got the richest of the rich, lock, stock, and barrel, arm in arm, Bezos and Trump. And then now because Trump did the China tariffs, Bezos is like, yeah, I'm done with that. No, we're no friends anymore. You've cost me $100 billion. It's not our fault you went to the cheapest bidder nonstop. Why don't you build some in America? Go, well, then the prices will go up. We'll pay it. It's called Origin. Origin clothing wear. The best gear in America, made 100% in America. You buy it, it lasts forever. Origin. I got the Origin pants on right now. The boots, they're a great company to use. We have the tyranny of our country is why I'm doing this. The tyranny of our social relationships is why I'm doing this. The tyranny of the guilt that people put each other under, whether it's two guy friends, just one guy always guilting the other one for every stupid little thing like he's a wife. That's tyranny. They don't get it, how they wield that stuff. If that's in your life, cut those people out of your life. Tell them, stop giving me guilt. I will cut you out of my life. Be gone with all that negativity. We have to try to just remove it. Let those people go on down the street and boo-hoo their negative ass right into their head into the ground like an ostrich. I am trying to affect change. That means you have to be able to go, he's right. I got to cut out toxicity. So some of the innovations and stuff that you have, and I went in here with, I made it a point to do a lot of references cited. So innovation and creativity, it talks about how tyranny suffocates originality. Source, Freedom House, Freedom of the World 2021. The mental and health social trust. Fear corrodes connection. That's the American Psychology Association, the toxicity of control. Let me repeat that title for you. The toxicity of control. How do you lead and not be toxic? We're going to get into that in other episodes. Performance versus purpose. Tyranny wins the battle, loses the war. Whether in a nation or a household, tyranny may bring short-term compliance, but at the cost of health, growth, and meaning. I've seen this so many times when you lose a general manager in a new business or in a business. So as coming in with the next team, you come in behind and you've seen where these general managers, you see this big in the car game, you see this in the construction game. I've seen this in so many different style of businesses. You get a new leader, a new chief in charge, and what they do is they come in, and usually the first thing they do, if they're not a very good leader, which is most of them are not very good leaders, the very good ones are like unicorns, believe it or not. That's why we're doing this podcast, is hopefully we can attract other good ones. And the ones that are average hopefully want to become inspired to be good. A little value out of there to the society. This is how we're going to change the world. But whether it's a dealership, which I can speak from, I've seen this happen multiple times in auto dealerships. You get a new general manager, well, that guy's a master of sales. He's not a master of running a business. He's a master of putting cash in the till. He's a salesman. That's what he does. And that's usually who's running a dealership, is the best salesman there that lasted the longest. That's not fair, because it's a business. He has no idea of the workings of service. He has no idea of warehouse. Doesn't know how each one of those can make him almost as much money as his sales side. He doesn't know about, and this is where I see it so often, building maintenance costs. And so what they do is they come in on these new projects and they start slashing. We don't need to do building maintenance. We can reduce that cost. It saves us $150,000 a year. HVAC, air and ventilation, air conditioning. Oh, we don't need to replace our filters, and let's just go ahead and shut that power suck off, because it's costing us $1,000 a month on electricity and another $500 a month in filters. So there's $1,500 a month. I'm saving. Look at me. I'm just badass. I'm a general manager. And they work their way down the list. We don't need a maintenance person here. We'll just call someone if something goes out. Oh, okay. So the garage door that went out, and there's no one here on a Saturday to lock it and close it, and the thing's wide open. Yeah, we'll just call a guy. Because you don't maintenance anything until it breaks, which then it costs you 10 times more to fix than it would have been to maintenance. It's a 1-to-10 ratio on deferred maintenance. So you look at this and you go, okay, in the first year though, when I'm not in that dealership and I'm evaluating that, and all I have to evaluate that business, accountants, which is why accountants should never run businesses, be presidents of businesses. They should be the number 2. They should be an advisor to a president. They should not run them. They'll run them straight into the ground, because they don't make business moves. They make empirical number moves. So when they judge this dude, and I've seen this so many times with general managers do this in the car dealership world, because they have such a high rotation. It's literally like carnies. They come in this week, out that week, whoever's sticking in. Depends on the dealership. Oh, that dealership got outbought by another dealership, and they're bringing in their group of freaking superstars that stick around for 10 minutes in an area and leave. And then now you're filled with who do we out locally that'll run this thing? That's not educated. That's not trained. That's not set up to succeed. So it's the company's fault for putting their GMs in these positions. They come in there, and a year later, guess what happens? The parent company audits the books and looks at the books and goes, holy shit, you sold a lot of cars. Holy crap, you have low maintenance costs. Holy crap, you guys made a bunch of money. You're getting a bonus, my friend. You are a rock star of rock stars. You are a kick-ass general manager. You keep doing you. Till the next year, people start getting sick. He's so cheap, he's not spending any money on the building, and starts looking like crap outside. Starts having trash everywhere because they don't have anybody walking around doing a lot inspection, cleaning it up. The cascading events of this are, within a year, the next year, those numbers look completely different. Whoa, your maintenance costs were way high. Yeah, we had to replace the HVAC unit. Apparently, when you turn it off and it goes to solid mold all the way through it, it's cheaper to freaking replace it than to try to clean it. Otherwise, you're blowing mold throughout your entire structure of your building, of your entire dealership, getting all of your salesmen sick because they all went home, or most of them went home, or fighting colds for the next year. Same thing with your office staff, same thing with your service people, same thing with your warehouse. People get sick and are dropping left and right. So you have indirect causes. So the next year they look at the books and they're like, whoa, what happened here? You had a rock star last year, and this year you're double the negative than when before you took it over. Now we got to dig out of this hole, son. What are you doing wrong? Insecure general manager pisses, starts drinking, goes nuts, goes crazy, he loses his job and rotates to the next gig before he gets fired so he can go get another gig as a general manager and slides that shit down the road to the next dealership. Meanwhile, here's Kelly trying to go, okay, we got to fix this one and resurrect this one with whatever team I happen to be lucky enough to be part of to help that. So then you set it back up. Again, you say, well, how did it happen with tyranny? How is that an example of tyranny? This guy came in and broke every business rule possible for success by carving out everything to make himself immediately look good, just like Mao did by not feeding his own people. He fed the world and kept the money flowing in, but didn't feed his own people. They all died. Dealerships, they quit and leave. You can't get good salesmen, you can't get good technicians, you can't get good, they all just leave and go to other stable places. So it's a vicious cycle. And you say, oh man, so you're using the term tyranny very generally. And you're absolutely right, because I keep feeling like everywhere I turn, we are in a tyranny. Like literally everywhere you turn, you're in a tyranny. Don't believe me? Go to TSA. Go to the airport. Tell me how that works out for you. They tell you to take off your shoes, take your laptops out, take your cell phones out. This week, take your jackets off. Next week, it's okay. This week, you're allowed water. Next week, no water for you. No water for you. It's a complete tyranny. Say one thing negative, sir, you're going in the back room. They put on the plastic glove and say, bend over. We're going to check your rectum. Damn near killed him. My point is tyranny is everywhere. So Plato's philosopher king, Frederick the Great, Lee Kuan Yew, all invoked as benevolent tyrants. People crave order in chaos. That's how Hitler gained power, by offering certainty, not freedom. Even in families, control is sometimes mistaken for care. I'm doing this for your own good, but without trust, control becomes harm. Real leadership builds trust alongside achievement in homes, in teams, and in nations. So, is tyranny bad? Yes, but it's also tempting, familiar, and often disguised. Tyranny is power without accountability, leadership without humility, obedience without voice. It's a price is always paid, if not now, then later. The topic of tyranny is resonating strongly with me, because the more I open my eyes and I look around to how people manage, I question, is tyranny a bad thing? I really do, because tyranny is almost like an absolute dictatorship. How do you run a company? At some point, you have to be a tyrant. And it's like Steve Jobs was known for that. That was like his thing with Apple, is he was an absolute tyrant. He had super high expectations. It was his way, his way, his way, or you're gone. And that's a tyrant. He built Apple. If you look at some of the biggest tyrants in business history, you look at Rockefellers, right? You look at Ford. You look at the Carnegies, U.S. Steel. You're talking about the train system going across, Ma Bell. Talking about power going across. Those guys they called tycoons, otherwise short for tyrants. What they did in America, and how they treated the American working man, and how they preyed on the systems, bought the politicians, bought everybody to succeed. You can have all the judgment you want about our country and you know, however position you want to be. I will call it exactly how I see it, not blinded by a patriotism. That is some gangster shit. That's the same thing that you'd see in a communist country. That's no different than an oligarch. No different. And in later episodes, we'll get into what is the difference between an oligarch? What is the difference between a tycoon? When you say monopolies, Ma Bell got so big that they had to get split up because they were basically the only telephone company, you know, around. So they say, we can't have this. We got to split it up because the guys got too good at buying out everybody else. Well, when you play the game of gangster with money and you got more than the people around you, just buy them out, buy everyone around them. Now you got their assets and you strangle people. That, in essence, is tyranny, or is it good business? This is where I'm really confused, because I'm trying to figure out, how do we get ahead? How do we get ahead in this life without being a bad tyrant? I'm saying, as a parent, I grew up with a father that was a tyrant, absolute sociopath, psychopath. At a moment's notice would go off, do as I say, not as I do. I mean, the whole walking hypocrite, everything. And you say to yourself, my gosh, if that was my experience, how many other experiences when I look around? Well, apparently Generation X has a lot of experiences like that because our parents were all the same way. You don't like it? There's the road. That was your choice. You don't like it? Here's an ass whooping for you. This is your choice. You don't like it, leave or get beat up. Those are your choices. That's called fear. No, that was parenting in America, at least, until about 1990. Right around there, then all that shit stopped when we had to start getting soft and sensitive and be happy to everybody. Meanwhile, we have a nation filled full of fatherless kids that have no discipline, and the mothers are trying to work 2 jobs, so there's no one at home for the kid. They didn't know tyranny. So they didn't know restraint. They didn't know this. And I look at other cultures and I'm saying to myself, gosh, these other cultures, and I say other because America is the melting pot of everybody. America is the world, all right? We have to be honest about that. We represent like literally every single country in the world. They have lots of people here and they're thriving here in America. We've let them all in as we're supposedly the world bad guys. Here's an area where I know we are good people. America was founded on people coming here with the hope of a dream. Check. Duly noted. Tyranny within relationships, social structure, leadership, within politics, being a judge, legal systems. Tyranny is everywhere. It could be your broker if you're a real estate agent. It's everywhere. And when does firm discipline cross the line into tyranny? Apparently when I can't complain, say anything back, or have an opinion without fear. I don't buy into that. I don't buy into that. As a Marine, I need you to take the hill. You can't be questioning me every 5 seconds. As a special operations mentality, you look at it like, okay, I will take the hill, but there's other ways to do it much smarter where we just don't die. Okay, that's a special operations. They think out of the box, or they're supposed to. So they had an area where they naturally gravitate towards creativity. They're allowed to be more creative than the line unit. Well, let's take this into construction. You're a new guy as a carpenter. Not the time to be creative and think you can figure out a way to frame a wall faster than the guy that's been doing it for 25 years. Now, is it tyranny because you follow the guy and he tells you, no, we're doing it this way. No more talking. I don't want to hear anything out of you. No creative ideas. Put your bags on and do as told. Don't talk, do as told. Is that tyranny? Or is that good structure? Again, when I'm going through these definitions and I'm looking back, you can see the bad ones, the Hitlers and everything else, but all of those bad ones, every single one of them started and grew to the point of where it was the avalanche that couldn't be stopped because of success of the tyranny. The success, it's called stability, hence Hitler. He gave the German people stability. He gave them pride and national pride again. He built up a mechanical, an industrial situation so the Germans were making money. Life was good. They were balling. The crime rates were the lowest ever. He was crushing it for that society. But what happens when you crush it? What's next? You always got to have that what's next? What's next? The what's next in his case is he was slighted by some Jews along the way. It really didn't sit well with them. So now you shift all your great anger towards that. And that's where he went into tyranny, is when he slipped from his madness. And this was before the death camps. He started slipping into madness long before the death camps occurred. And you think, okay, well, that's a prime example of tyranny. We'll talk about each one of those because I really want to do more episodes where I spend the full 45 minutes or so on, say, Mao, and I can teach you about the death camps and we can actually learn deeper together on this stuff. This show is just touching on what tyranny, and my gosh, it's literally everywhere around us. Is it bad? Is it not? And then the real question I have is, show me a successful anything else that didn't have a benevolent tyrant at the top leading it. Throughout history. Show me any. Give me an example of a society that would be quote unquote ideal, which, well, okay, what does that look like? Okay, let's think hippie here for a second. Maybe a little bit of the dreams of them is a place where people can just walk down the street safely. They can eat whatever they want. They can afford to have things that they would desire. They can do whatever they want to do without freedom of persecution. If they want to be an artist, they can be a dancer, or they can be a mechanic. Freedom of love, happiness. Is this like some utopia? This world has never existed in history. Talking about race equality, gender equality, social equality, and the ability to just have opportunities, right? Name a society. Ever. I can't name it either. No one can. There was I heard, and I'm going to dive into the historical context. I heard there was an island in the Mediterranean or someplace like that. It's not the Amazonian women, but there was a female-ruled society. And I've heard word that this was one of the closest ever utopia societies, right? From what I did hear, they were very militant. So there are certain levels of checks and balances. If you cross this line, that's your ass. That's in anything. So my point is on this is, I guess, tyranny, like discipline or control, if it's used correctly, it is one of the best tools you can use. It's the problem with power is power corrupts absolutely. No matter there's very few cases, with the exception of the only one I'm really seeing that's wielding it like that is Jocko. He's the only true super baller leader that's he can manage the ego side of this, that he can run billions and it'd just be he's just a dude that you'd see walking down the street and you'd go chalk it up with him, go split some firewood. Very rarely do you see that. What would he do as the president of the United States? He said it best, I'd be a benevolent dictator. Because you have to go in and stomp on the rules. How could you fix the United States even if you put the best dude in there? The second the best dude gets in there, now he's fending heat that he never had to fend heat out here doing what he's doing as a businessman and a successful retired, badass and all that stuff from the military, and crushing it in every aspect of his life because he wields leadership with such precision. I mean, he wields that sword better than anybody around. How would he do as president? There's a reason why he ain't going to do it, because they'll eviscerate him. You can't have your morals. You can't have that and keep it. Because as soon as you do it and you stick to your guns, your own party will turn on you because they suffer too. Their constituents suffer. This is why, to me, to truly have a movement of change, the president that's going to be able to become the benevolent dictator has to be given the keys to the kingdom freely. This is a slippery slope too, because in history where this has been done, power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts. Yeah, it got him. Every single time. Not a king has ever survived this level of power. George Washington is the only one that I can think coming close enough in my head that was he was so powerful. They're we want you to be king of America. And he says, no, we need to do a presidency. They need to elect him. A couple tours. He could have kept running it. America loved him. That dude was juiced in on every level. I'd love to do a show on George Washington. That guy had so many secret society. He was part of the Masons. He was part of this, the design teams. The complexity of that man, amazing. I would really like to do a real deep dive on George Washington. And, I think as these things morph, maybe we'll try to do that, pick one, and that, kind of like what the Fat Electrician does. Shout out to him on the podcast. If you haven't heard it, check out your boy, the Fat Electrician. Hilarious, but man, he does a really good job. Kind of a role model for me in one capacity of different styles of the way he does his shows. He does very military-based shows. But to the point of tyranny, and as I kind of try to figure out how to wrap this up, because I don't have a wrap up. Truthfully, when you start talking about tyranny, you can go for hours, longer than anyone wants to listen to me talk in this episode. And I want to break it down by geographic region. So I want to look at all the tyrants in Europe, go look at Napoleon, look at them and say, what were their goods? What did they do? What was it that they made them effective as leaders? How they rise, how they inspire, how they do it, and then why did they fall? How did they fall? When was that peak? Because how do we reclaim the greatness? Which we are already great. And so that's, I guess, a bad phrase anyways. How do you reclaim it when we've never stopped being it? We are just consistently going up as a superpower. But when you look at the empirical evidence, we're broke as a country. We're dumber than a box of rocks. We're like ranked 30th or some nonsense in academics, so we're not very smart. Love to fight, love to party, and we're the place that everyone wants to come to because you can come here and crush it no matter who you are on the planet. You can have no education and come to America, and if you're willing to work your ass off, you will be a millionaire. Backs on that. You will have a successful life. If you're willing to not party and not do drugs, you will succeed. You will crush the game in America. If you have a high work ethic, you won't party, you won't do drugs, you go home at a decent hour, and you're not worried about trying to get laid every 5 seconds, this country will give you everything your heart desires. Do any of the aforementioned? This country will give you everything your heart desires. On this week's episode of the Kelly Lawson Podcast, still confused as ever on whether tyranny is good or bad because it's used in every relationship I've seen, at least multiple versions of tyranny. I don't know. I can't say. I've seen in cultures that raise kids very well where the kids are all highly functional. And I've seen where it wasn't used and the kids went out and became just nightmares of society because they were bored and they didn't have structure. I don't know. For this week's episode, I'm going to leave it at that. What do you think? Please leave it in the comments below. Is tyranny good? Is it bad? How do you balance it? How do you check it? And what are your thoughts on the use of how we're using tyranny in kind of such a broad general swope or a swipe of the brush, if you will? For this week, it's Kelly Lawson. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this one was a little more entertaining. I'm going to really try to do better each and every episode. If this episode challenged you, share it, think on it, and talk about it. Until next time, stay thoughtful, stay grounded, and above all, stay free. I'm Kelly Lawson.